Hello, my name is Howard Gray, and I'm the assistant to the president at Georgetown University, and I'm going to share some reflections with you as colleagues in the apostolate of Jesuit higher education. And I'm happy to be with you, and I hope that this will be helpful to you. In a recent document, Some Characteristics of Jesuit Colleges and Universities, a self-evaluation instrument, you'll notice that there is an emphasis throughout the characteristics, 7 of them presented, on the Catholic character as well as the Jesuit character of Jesuit higher education. I want to say a word about that. Frequently, there has been a mild critique that Jesuits and those who work with Jesuits in this colleagueship are better at talking about the Ignatian heritage or the Jesuit tradition than they are about the Catholic dimension. That's true and it's untrue. There's no way in which a Jesuit college or university can be Jesuit without being Catholic as well. That's assumed. There is no Jesuit order that's independent of the church. But what is also true is that the style of apostolic service, the tradition of spirituality, the outreach, what Ignatius himself and his early companions called the way of proceeding, is distinctive. The way of proceeding in our Catholicism is different from that of other religious communities. Not better, different. And that diversity is, of course, what we honor as Catholics. We're made up of many traditions and many insights, many charisms, and many different kinds of works. So let's put that thing to rest. When we talk about Catholic and Jesuit, we're talking about a united effort. Now, I'm going to stress primarily, where are we in the way we look at Catholicism today? Now, I have a second caveat, if you don't mind, and that is, this is my opinion, and it's just to stimulate discussion and interest, and you may have another take. It's not wrong and it's not controversial. It's just an effort to get discussion started, and I'm offering my discussion. And if we would think of it in that way of both of us having the freedom, you to listen and to choose, and me to speak as truthfully as I can about how I see where we are. We're at a privileged moment now. It's the 50th anniversary of the calling of the Second Vatican Council by Pope John the 23rd, a momentous event in which the Church really celebrated its universality, and later on, as Karl Rahner was to designate it, that the Church came to a consciousness of itself as a world church, not just a Roman church, or not just a Western European church, or a North Atlantic church, but a world church involving many nations, many cultures, many viewpoints, and many histories of being a Catholic community. And so that's what we would like to talk about, this kind of world dimension of self-awareness of the Catholic community that was inaugurated, not for the first time, but in a renewal way at the Second Vatican Council, our being a world church. Now, what I've been asked to say a little bit about as we talk about this is, what are some of the characteristics that I would say are especially helpful from the Second Vatican Council, and especially from this vantage point of 50 years? Parenthetically, you know that there is some discussion about how we interpret the Second Vatican Council. It has been popularly characterized as Augustinian, which says the Vatican Council, as it has developed, has taken on a kind of guardianship of the integrity of the Church in a world that's basically hostile to many of the realities that the Church embraces. There's a second view, which is a little different, called the Neo-Thomist, was saying that the Church rather embraces the world, is in conversation with the world, or as the Jesuits assumed, taking a lead from the Holy Father at their last congregation, the Church, like the society, is at the frontiers. Where does the Church meet the world and is in conversation with the world? I'm not going to settle that kind of discussion. Both people are loyal Catholics. They're trying to hammer out an interpretation of Vatican II according to their own loyalties and lights. You're going to detect mine. as I go through this. It's going to be far more leaning towards what I would call the neo-Thomist. That doesn't mean other people are wrong. It just means I'm letting you know where I'm coming from. And that could be part of our discussion. There's no sense having just a blind affirmation that no one can object to, but nobody learns from. We want to have a discussion. So we're going to talk about that Catholic character. Now I'm going to settle, first of all, what I think is very important. It's at the beginning of the document at Gaudium et Spes, the Pastoral Constitution on the World. If you don't mind my reading you a short paragraph. It says, the joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the men and women of this age, especially those who are poor or in any way afflicted, these are the joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the followers of Christ. Indeed, nothing genuinely human fails to raise an echo in the hearts, for theirs is a community composed of men and women. United in Christ, they are led by the Holy Spirit in their journey to the kingdom of their Father, and they have welcomed the news of salvation, which is meant for every man and woman. That is why the community realizes that it is truly linked with humankind and its history in the deepest bonds. Now that's, as I said, from Gaudium et Spes, the Pastoral Constitution of the Church, that was promulgated on December 7th, 1965. I think it's a wonderful statement, and I think what it underscores is the sense of solidarity, of union of the people of the church with the people of the world, that we are born in a historical context, and we are nurtured in a historical context. We develop and grow, and we evolve in a world situation. So the world influences us, we influence the world. And primarily, it's with a kind of harmony and recognition that human struggles are everybody's struggles. And that's what binds us together. The church brings a dimension of interpretation, but it doesn't exhaust that interpretation. Okay? Well, that's a beautiful statement. And out of that statement, as you reflect on what we really want to think of in our own Catholicism, for me, first of all, are three characteristics of how I think we see what it is to be a woman or man today. The first characteristic of our own humanity is our dignity. Dignity by creation, that God doesn't make junk. God has made us the image, the reflection, and the partners of God. We could go on in all of the adjectives that describe this union with God and the origin of God, and God does not relinquish ownership or love or care, but God continues to hover over this creation, which is ourselves. So our fundamental dignity comes from the fact that we recognize ourselves as someone that God has embraced as God's own, entrusted with the labor with God of cultivating this creation and destining us to be part of the eternal, everlasting, ongoing family of God. That's a lot of stuff to remember. But we don't really honor our Catholicism if we don't see this radical sense of the ownership, partnership, and destiny that has made us God's own friends. And that dignity is one that's endowed. It's a gift. It's not something that we earned or deserve. It's simply a donation. Just as a father or mother say to a child that your name is Jones, you're Leslie Jones, you're Alfred Jones, you're Mary Jones. That gives an identity, and the child doesn't exactly earn it. It's bestowed out of love by the parents as an identity that this child carries. And for the rest of his life, they'll always be signing their name as part of a family tradition. Well, Christian is the name, or creature is the name, or world citizen is the name, but all of this has been endowed by God. The flip side of it is not only that this dignity is something that's freely given to us, but it's something that we also share and protect, and we ennoble by the way in which we bestow dignity on one another. Equality, tolerance, understanding, forgiveness. These are all elements of our bestowing on another the gift we have received of a shared dignity. And so the Catholic profile, I think, out of the Second Vatican Council, of what it is to be human, is to both accept and bestow the great gift of dignity that is part of our human heritage. And it is a kind of fundamental understanding in so much of the documentation of the Second Vatican Council and the contemporary ways in which you want to talk about our Catholic character, that we believe in our dignity and we believe in bestowing dignity. And the balance between these two is always very important. You cannot relinquish your human dignity. You have no right to do that, because what you're protecting is something God has given to you. At the same time, you also have an obligation or responsibility out of love and care to give that same dignity to other people, that they have the right to grow in their own self-fulfillment, in their own sense of intimacy, in their own sense of developing their gifts as well as they can and contributing to their culture and their society as well as they can. So think of this balancing act as one of the first characteristics of what I would call contemporary Catholic anthropology: the gift of dignity and the call to dignity, in order that we might be a human family. The second that really hinges very much on this sense of human dignity is freedom. Now, freedom means what? It means the ability to progress by self-identity without any undue intrusion either from the state or other people. It's the capacity to be able to express that human dignity and to give that human dignity with a minimum of inhibitions that in any way would curtail my dignity or my giving of the dignity to other people. So everything we talk about in our own social ethics, it seems to me, it stems from this understanding that we are free people. We are not compelled, we are invited. Now, it's true that there have been times in which that gift has been abused, or it's been curtailed, or it's been bounded, and that's unfortunate. And sometimes the official church has contributed to that. I don't deny that. But basically, at its best, the Catholic understanding of the human person is this sense of freedom, the ability to make one's own way in this world, to form one's own conscience according to the dictates of the Lord and the priorities of the church, and at the same time to donate my talents and energies in the way in which I feel that I am fulfilled, and I also continue to contribute to the responsibility of being a Catholic person, a woman or man. So that human freedom is not anarchy. It doesn't mean we do whatever we want, but always we're governed by what is good, the true good for myself, what is the true good for others. Are there negotiations of the freedom? Do I have the freedom to do whatever I want? No, I have the freedom to do it within a context. I have a freedom to drive my car down the street. It's my car. But I don't have the freedom to ignore the traffic lights, or to where it says pedestrians have the right to cross that street. I don't jam my car through. These rights are always put within a context in which we honor as well the rights of others. So there's a balancing act going on in human freedom. And that's not always easy. Sometimes we have to negotiate, sometimes we have to do more study. But the principle that's being protected always is this negotiation of human freedom as being essential to what it is to be a man or woman. We teach our children, don't we, developmentally, that at the beginning of life, we do a lot of, I would say, loving dictation. Look both ways before you cross the street. Do your homework. What school are you going to go to? Who are your companions? I want to meet the people that you call your friends. There's a kind of custodial love that guides that freedom, but it doesn't suppress it. And a wise parent, developmentally helps the young woman or young man to grow in that sense of their freedom as a freedom also to engage responsibly the freedom of other folks. So that's a very important part, I think, of what the church at the Second Vatican Council emphasized was both the call to freedom as part of our human dignity, but also the responsibility of that freedom as being an expression of a loving human community as well. And then there's a third element, I would say. Now remember what I said earlier at the beginning of this discussion. You're listening to me and you're people of your own education, your skills, your professions, your own experiences. You can add to this, and I'm hoping that you'll see me as priming the pump, not in any way terminating discussion or debate. But I'd like to think of the third one as being not only the sense of our human dignity and the freedom we have to express that human dignity, but also what I would call is a kind of stewardship or solidarity. Stewardship towards one another, a solidarity in our aims. Now, solidarity is a more recent reflection on the Church's social teaching. And what it means basically is how do we bring charity and justice together so that we both have a regard for the rights of others and a kind of affection, a love, and a care that others too can grow. It touches every area of our life that we have in our own dealings with developing countries, a responsibility to be in solidarity with their desire for human dignity, for their expressions of freedom, and therefore their growth of their cultures. So people, for example, want to save their cultures. They want to preserve them. They want to honor them. They want to pass it on to their children. We see a responsibility not to interfere with that or not to ridicule it because it's different from ours, but to honor it and to create a climate in which people from differing cultures, differing experiences can live together in what? In the same human qualities we all want to honor. Dignity, freedom, and then the ability to live together. If we don't live together in a solidarity, there isn't going to be any globe or any universe, any environment for us to call our own. So more and more a consciousness on so many levels of Catholic living has been intensified. And we realize that part of that solidarity has a balance both of the human reality that we enjoy together, but the diversity in which that human reality is frequently expressed. Different languages, different customs, different histories, different potentialities, they have to be there. That the differences do not destroy our coming together, but they enhance the richness. Like holding up a fine jewel, it's one jewel, but through the prism of light that moves through that jewel, you see different ways of looking at one jewel, different color, different angles, a different sparkle, if you will. So too in literature, which is something that I would know something about, there are different writers, and they have different emphases. So I don't get angry because Jane Austen doesn't sound like Tolstoy, for example. They're different writers. But I can recognize that both are dealing with the human community, with human emotions and human affections and a particular kind of society. So while I honor the differences, I also recognize the similarities, and I title that novels or literature. So to music, there are different composers. Each has his own or her own style, and I honor that, and the diversity is part of the richness of the variety of expressions of what it is to be human, the freedom to be this kind of composer, and to write with my own inspiration. And we could go on with the natural sciences, with architecture, we can go on with urban planning. There's a variety and a density and capaciousness about that variety, which is part of the human expression. Well, the Church at Vatican II was startling in its recognition that people are called out of their dignity to be free enough to develop talents that are different and yet respectful of one another. That peace, joy, harmony, suffering, struggle, ambition, these are human realities. And recognizing this allows us to say, yes, we are different realities, but we are bound by that one fundamental reality that we are men and women together. Just as this document at the beginning of Gaudium et Spes lays out. We really are people that listen to the likenesses we share with the human family. Now, part of that also that the church recognizes, and we struggle with today, and there are different viewpoints, is that there are going to be people where they experience different ways of looking at faith, different ways of looking at sexual mores, different ways of looking at their own sexual affections. And we can argue about these, but we can't deny that they're there. And one of the things we can also not deny as Catholic and Jesuit in the universities and the colleges that we sponsor is that we have students who are trying to find their way through their differences to what they can express as their commonality as being part of the human family. That's not easy in an age of tremendous diversity, and the diversity is being celebrated more and more. And so we have to talk about the negotiations that allow us to let those differences be honored and respected, and at the same time to grow in a response that also helps the differences of other folks to be honored and respected. We have to work at that solidarity. So I would like to say at the beginning, and hope that it comes into a discussion, that out of the Second Vatican Council, there are many profiles of what it is to be human. I'm offering 3. You might think of others. You might want to talk about that and say, what is the humanity that we celebrate? I would want to suggest also that that paragraph from Gaudium et Spes that talks about this union in the human family, and it talks about it in almost poetic terms, is not a bad way for us as Catholic Jesuit institutions to think of what we are as part of this wider human family that was so celebrated and consecrated at the Second Vatican Council.